This is the Dreadful Podcast from TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Lovecraft Country Season 1, Episode 3, Holy Ghost.
The body parts that were found in what is now my basement, it took all night, but I was able to find all 8 faces. Lucy, Anarcha, Grover.
Colorful folks who disappeared on the south side.
Now restless souls trapped in my house with their killer. They want out. I know it.
Uncle George would reference a haunted house story right now that proves that these ghosts are going to stop till you join them on the other side. I think it's time to move out.
Welcome back, fellow Dreadfuls. Yes, this is the Dreadful Podcast, and, dare I say it, let us pray for the Holy Ghost, the third installment of Season 1 of Lovecraft Country. Yes, we're on TV Podcast Industries, and I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your other hosts, Derek. It's only when you said it's episode 3 and it's called the Holy Ghost that I went, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. It's the third one. Very impressive.
It is. And we should have said, I'm one of your Holy Ghosts, John.
We should have said, I'm one of your Holy Ghosts, Derek.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Just to fulfill the supernaturally mystery horror element of the Dreadful Podcast.
Oh, and what an episode we have this week. We're going to go spoiler-filled straight from the off on this one. But have to say, this one really felt like something from American Horror Story. One of the really good episodes of American Horror Story. Felt like we had a horror house here. So,
well, we have had this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Derek believes this is potentially turning out like an anthology series.
Kind of.
And I'm not entirely sure yet. I'll have to wait for the other episodes to come simply because of that whole connective tissue back to episodes 1 and 2, with the arrival of Christine, Braithwaite there right at the end of the episode, with the gun being pointed at her by Atticus. So yes, this is definitely a spoiler-filled discussion because we've just spoiled the end of episode 3 for everyone.
When we say it's a spoiler-filled discussion, we're supposed to say, go away, watch the episode and come back. But I have a feeling you wouldn't have downloaded the episode or wouldn't start playing it without knowing what it is. That's why we called it out at the beginning of the episode. But just to say, John, that doesn't negate it being an anthology series. I'm talking
that is true.
Stories within the Lovecraft Country with these characters is what this felt like this episode. True. But there's definitely going to be connective tissue throughout the season. We'll talk about all of it as we go in. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do so over on tvpodcastindustries.com, where all of our main podcast feed is. The reason why you'd subscribe over there is because we've got loads of stuff going on over there. We're just covering Lovecraft Country on the Dreadful Podcast at dreadfulpodcast.com. You can get all of our coverage of that and the coverage that we did of Penny Dreadful City of Angels. But if you want all of our coverage for all of our podcasts, pop on over to TV Podcast Industries, because we have our wrap-up of Season 2 of Umbrella Academy, a show that we covered over the course of about 3 weeks. So you can get our wrap-up, and we'll be giving out our prize for the winner of our pub quiz over there for our Umbrella Academy Season 2 coverage. We also will be beginning later on this week. The Boys is returning to Amazon Prime, and we'll be covering the first 3 episodes of that show. The show's releasing the first 3 episodes next Friday. And then new episodes every week from then on until they finish off their season in October.
We will be joining our fellow boys and girls at that moment as we deep dive into our discussion and spoiler-filled look at The Boys Season 2. Yeah. So looking forward to that.
It'll be fun covering both shows. I didn't think about it when we started covering this show. This show is 10 episodes long. The Boys is 8 episodes long. And actually, even though we started this show before The Boys got released, we're actually going to be finishing it after The Boys. So Lovecraft Country is going to be overarching on top of The Boys. What a great antithesis to Lovecraft Country, having the comedy kind of setting of The Boys, the ultra violence of The Boys alongside the uber horror, and not as much comedy, a lot more serious kind of
definitely
insight to Lovecraft Country. So as a bookend on either side of the spectrum of TV shows, I think the two of them will work quite well together over in TV podcast industries.
Yes, that is one hell of an interesting bookend for sure.
Good fun.
But as Derek said, you can head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com. You can subscribe on any good or evil podcast catcher of your choice. Mm-hmm. We're over on Spotify. We're over on Google Podcasts. We're over on Apple Podcasts. You name it. You can check us out there. Rate us, subscribe, leave a review. It is very much appreciated.
Yeah.
All that support, because supporting the podcast is, of course, sharing the love, as we say. And if you want to, you can also support us over on Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If you want to share any thoughts about any of our shows, any of the episodes we cover, any of the shows we cover, email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. We'll incorporate the feedback in the next episode after we receive it. Or if the show's well gone and you've just catching up on something that we've done in the past, like Daredevil or Jessica Jones or Gotham or anything like that, and you just want to send on your thoughts to us, email us to that email address and we'll definitely reply to you as well. Love getting emails in from everybody.
And another great way to send in feedback is through reviews. So we'd just like to thank, over on Apple Podcasts, our first review for Dreadful Podcast, actually, from a listener, Lizno, 5-star review. So thank you so much. They go, if you're looking for an informative and entertaining podcast, this one will truly fit the bill. Oh. The hosts are not afraid to share their show theories, as well as offer any insights they may have regarding each episode. Totally worth your time. Thank you so much, Lizno, for those really nice words. It's so good to get the feedback, certainly through reviews, as well as directly into our email. It's really good to get the feedback. It's really nice. Thank you so much.
Such nice feedback as well. We are definitely unafraid to share our theories, no matter how wildly off the mark they'll be. We do love sharing our theories on the show as well. Thanks so much, and really good to get some reviews. We don't get very many reviews on iTunes, to be honest. I think a lot of our listeners are over on Spotify, where you can't review the podcast. But if you are on a podcast catcher or a podcast player that does support leaving reviews, please rate us and review us. Sure, why not? If it takes a couple of minutes of your time, we love reading them, and we'll definitely read them out in the podcast as well.
Yeah, exactly. Sharing the podcast is sharing the frights of horror.
I love it. I love it. John putting on his Lovecraft radio voice there.
Indeed. Yeah, so with that, on to Holy Ghost, which is episode 3 of season 1 of Lovecraft Country. Mm-hmm. Derek, what are some of the episode details?
Yep, the episode was directed by Daniel Sackheim. We spoke about him last episode and all the wonderful credits he's had in the past. Episode, once again, written by Misha Green. In the writer's room, we also have Jonathan I. Kidd and Sonia Winton, both writers for the show, written the episodes in the writer's room with Misha Green. This seems to be Misha Green's show. We're getting the writing credit for, or the teleplay by Misha Green credit every episode. She's the showrunner of the show as well. So very much her vision.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but it's good that the other members of the writing team are given the credit as well. So absolutely, yeah, good stuff.
John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with the HBO synopsis for the episode?
Sure. Hoping to mend her relationship with her sister Ruby, Leti turns a ramshackle Victorian house on Chicago's north side into a boarding house, an endeavour that stokes neighbourhood racism and awakens dormant spirits stuck in the house. Meanwhile, Atticus remains burdened by a guilty conscience as George's wife Hippolyta presses him for the full story of what happened in Ardham.
Once again, the terror and threat coming externally from normal, average, everyday, horrible humans, and inside from the spirits of the dead. I love this kind of balancing act they're doing with this season. They're really putting this stuff really well together, as what are the real threats going on in the time, and from scene to scene, the threat changes really. So
absolutely, but I think what's really good about it is that it does show how much of horror is drawn from real life, real life experiences or perceptions. And I think what's great about the show is that it marries the two of them. Because certainly with this Victorian house, this creepy house, this hell house, it really does, marry the two, because, both internally within the walls of this house and within externally with the neighborhood, it's pure horror. It's totally awful because, I mean, when you think about it, certainly in terms of the neighborhood horror of the racism, the intimidation, the harassment, you just kind of think that's their home. And you think of living in your own home and being subject to that. And you just go, what a bunch of absolute, well, F-wits, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it makes your blood boil because you just think that's where you're supposed to be safe, secure, and it just causes absolute mayhem. And it's just really good. I like how it marries that supernatural horror with real life horror, and actually showing that in a sense they're both equally as bad because they frighten people, they're terrifying, and in some instances just damn right out of order and awful and violent and everything else in between. So I love how that's being done with this show so far, the marrying of those two for sure.
Yeah, definitely. John, let's get into our kind of big moments and our things for discussion for the episode. I know you're going to kick us off first. I was just going to call it the speech at the beginning, where the static screen that's at the beginning, but I know that's incorporated in your point. Do you want to kick us off with what you thought about the episode overall, the bits that you liked about it?
It really is. Like, my kind of main big point here is pretty all encompassing, but I'm going to start off with the line, pioneering is dangerous. And first off, just in those few words, I love how that relates to Leti, her sister Ruby, and the boarders living there on Chicago's north side, completely out of their comfort zone in terms of the neighborhood, and just being subject to the abuse of their neighbors. You know, they are pioneers, and it is dangerous for them because of those external threats, and also because of that house and what lies within it. But I loved this whole twist for me, or at least it was a twist for me, because I have to own up here how I was drawn in by that the text right at the beginning, which talks about how 10 people of color moved into a house on the north side of Chicago, and 10 days later 3 went missing. And in terms of my own short-sightedness or being drawn into that, you know, it led me down a number of different paths, or into several cubby holes, closets, cellars, to try and find the truth of what this episode was going to be surprised at every turn. And so for me, there was a twist here, from the setup with that opening, few lines, with the countdown happening throughout the episode, and this idea of the 3 people. So I actually thought that Leti had moved into the house that they were referencing at the start.
Okay.
And I kind of thought that the disfigured and restless ghosts that we see that excellent one in the bedroom with just the hand reaching out, and the jaw ripped off. We see the other one in the bathroom. He certainly got he probably got a pretty big shock when Leti and Atticus decide to have, sort of a quickie in the bathroom. But we see in that moment another one. And I kind of thought that initially that these were the 3 people that went missing, that were still inhabiting the house, haunting it, being restless spirits, wanting to kind of move on.
It's a great choice by the writers here to put that up on screen at the start, because I think it just puts you a little bit off or on edge throughout the episode, because you're kind of thinking, is this going to be Leti and our gang? Is it going to be some of the other people that moved in with her? Is it going to be some of the church community that she moves in later on? Is it going to be the kids that one of them is going to die, or 3 of them are going to die? You know, there's so many moments within the episode where you're kind of thinking, someone's going to die here. Is it one from each of those groups? But I do think you are taken aback by perhaps it's 3 of the neighbors that go missing in the house, because just how it's written in there, it's kind of 3 of them is what it feels like when it's not saying. It doesn't say exactly. It says 3 people went missing from the house. But you had an extra, as you say, you have an extra layer on that, where you thought that this wording was about something that happened in the house 10 years beforehand, and they'd moved into the house where people had been.
So I thought the countdown that was happening was actually 10 days till another 3 people were going to go missing out of, that could include Ruby and Leti.
Yeah.
Something that was going to happen to those. So that I thought this was a countdown for something really bad happening to the people who had moved in.
Good bit of extra tension there.
No, absolutely.
I think you weren't tense enough watching the show. I watched the show with John every time. There's a moment early on in the episode when the lift dropped for the first time, and that was the first scream from John on the couch beside me.
This was really spooky. I kind of really like haunted house.
These are your favorite genre, really.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah.
You know, Hell House by Richard Matheson is one of my favorites. I love that aspect to it. And even, you know, moving through these genres, you know, we have the haunted house, the Hell House, this idea of poltergeist as well, with the whole seance, being conducted by their friends, which I loved the fact that they slaughter, a goat on the veranda of the house.
Sorry.
And, you know, to remove these evil spirits, these restless spirits, that's, you know, I think they are thinking that these are spirits that want to move on, which they absolutely are. But of course, there is another big spirit in the house, which is far more menacing, and is trying to keep them there, really, because those people, those missing people, it was ultimately, the three white, men who had been harassing them throughout this episode with the horns, with the burning cross in the front lawn. And I really kind of thought this was, just so good. And just that whole seance aspect where it finally became revealed that they were removing this racist surgeon or doctor who had been experimenting with missing people from the south side of Chicago.
Or kidnapped people, which is what it seems like.
Yeah, kidnapped people.
Because I think when they read out the news story about what happened with him, they kind of alight on the fact that he was friends with certain people in the town who effectively, one of the police chiefs who was a decorated officer, yet he was providing victims for this guy to experiment on. It's the way that Letty's pieced the story together, that there's two very influential white people in town who are supplying experimental subjects for this scientist, I want to say. Is that the right word for someone?
Or surgeon, or just general psychopath,
to
be honest. And I thought that seance, and I think in the end, the Leti calling upon her strength, along with the combined strength of the victims. I thought it was really nice them in the circle kind of chanting, and their disfigured selves, which, you know, I think the one that really stood out to me was the big baseball, or basketball player with the baby's head on the top.
John, I don't think that's going to be just you that stood out to. That is the most weird of the lot, because we see him early on when the two guys first go into the house and they're trapped in there, the two white guys who get trapped in the house the first time. That's the first time we see this basketball player, this monstrous body walking out of the darkness. And then as the camera pans up, you see the baby's head on top of it, kind of giggling like a baby would, kind of thing.
And before that, they've just heard the baby giggling as well.
Exactly.
So they think there's a baby in the room.
Yeah.
And hey presto, this ghost materializes.
And it is very distracting. It's almost a comedy moment in that early part. But I think that's part of, you know, if you're trying to line up the victims that disappeared with the number that's given at the start of the episode, you have, as you say, you have the older lady that's lost her jaw, you have the guy in the bathroom, and you have this basketball player effectively, and you kind of go, maybe those are the three victims that had gone missing in the past. So those, you're lining up your numbers. When it cuts to later on in this moment where you have the circle where they're trying to get rid of this demon surgeon effectively, and their bodies start to rematerialize into what they used to be like, it actually works much better. But that moment early on, I was kind of going, either the CGI here doesn't work, or this is just too weird for the scene, or it gave me a bit of a laugh when I thought I should be being scared by it. But I suppose you're creeped out by the crying baby to begin with, and then to have the scene afterwards. But it probably relieves a bit of tension, because the episode is very scary.
It
haunted house kind of episode.
It really is. But I love that moment where they all come together, and Leti as well, and their combined strength, you know, of Leti, who has a really nice, moment actually with Atticus where she,
yes, she does.
You know, she says, "I found a different world, one that I didn't know. It isn't what I thought it was." But she's kind of has this inner strength to say, "But I have to confront it and face it, even though I'm as scared as hell."
Yeah.
And you see that with her using this strength to combat this malevolent, psychotic ghost of a former scientist who experimented on kidnapped black people from the Chicago South Side.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it's combined with his victims who expunge his malevolent ghost. And it's just, I think, a really nice moment that happens. And that as they're doing it, their disfigured selves become their normal self again, which is really good. And they're able to move on. And in fact, the victims also exact their kind of force on these three white males who have been harassing Leti. And they ultimately are the three missing people. And that's where it was like, that's really good for me. And that's because I had this whole different thing going on in my head as to what was going on. But I just thought this was really nice because this idea of the hell house, that the house is alive and that it has these malevolent ghosts, that can't move on or trapped within it, sort of, transposed with the horns going off and the police being called, the burning cross, the harassment that they find which is the same thing about this idea of being trapped from the outside by your neighbors and trapped within by these malevolent spirits within, or these restless spirits of the victims, was just really well done. I really, really liked it.
So well structured, really, yeah. And one of the other things that, if you look at it from the other aspect of it, this is the whole thing about Letty's character. She is so strong because look at the shit she has to deal with in the regular outside world.
Yeah, exactly.
And when she's confronted with a supernatural situation, well, she's just as strong a woman because, again, look what she's had to put up with in her life. So while she is, I'm sure, terrified about what's going on, she's going, it's my house. And I love how she takes that power from the evil scientist, the madcap scientist dude. And I love how she takes the power from the evil surgeon. Effectively, he starts off with him as the ghost when she pieces the pictures together and it forms his face shouting, "Get out of my house" to her. As he eventually comes back to his ghostly form and the whole circle are formed. Letty's inspiring all of these people that they're not dead like they were from him. Take themselves back, become yourselves again, and do one last thing before you move on. Get rid of this man from my house. Well, get out of my house, as she says to him.
And it's get out of my effing house.
Absolutely.
Basically. Yeah. I love that she screams that at him.
Yeah.
But it's just I love how it interchanges between these different aspects. And of course, what you find in that final scene where the lift goes down to basement 2, and you see this cavern with lights, or this tunnel with the 3 bodies of the white men who are still missing, and then loads of skeletons throughout this tunnel. And the other important thing is that these 3 white men are missing, yet all these 8 victims, whilst reported, certainly on the north side, that there's really little care for whether they will be found or are still missing.
Right.
That's kind of what I felt by having this trail of skeletons throughout the, that sort of dug out earthen cavern was that, okay, they're missing because they're white. And on the north side, all these other skeletons that have been kidnapped or missing and probably have had very little attention from the Chicago police into their cases.
Yeah, it was very much like when the police chief or the police officer who brings Leti into prison or collects her that night. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But when he brings her in, he talks to her about it and says, "We found bits of body parts everywhere in the house." we know that there were 8 people downstairs in that basement kind of thing. And that's the 8 people, I think, that formed the circle. I think if I didn't count them, unfortunately, should be doing due diligence in our podcast, John. But I think it's 8 people that form that circle. And the whole point is that it's not just 8 victims. That's just the 8 body parts that have been found. And the police are willing to just leave it there because they don't really care about the black people that have gone missing in the house. Yeah. So that's the rest of the victims that this person, must have killed and were taken from the streets in South Chicago. Yeah.
Absolutely. The one thing I do need to point out is, scariest room in your house is probably the cellar, if you have one, or the attic. Well, this house has got an attic and it's got a cellar.
Yeah.
It's also has a cellar of the cellar where Leti was doing her photography.
Right. Yeah.
And in fact, it's got 3 of these scary things because then it's got the cellar where all the bodies are kept.
Sub-basement. Yes.
Yeah. It's it's 3 times the scare with all these cellars. But I really thought this was a great haunted house, Hell House episode. Yeah. And I really liked it. And I even thought, it's not just that, because it's also actually about a serial killer house as well, like you would see, whether it's something like Psycho-esque in that sense.
It did look like the Psycho house.
And it did, exactly. And certainly with the disfigured victims, I really got a sense of the island of Dr. Moreau with these disfigured test subjects, in this case with humans rather than with animals.
Do you know what I was thinking? I was thinking of Beetlejuice and kind of The Frighteners, the one that Peter Jackson's one, I think he did with Michael J. Fox. Had that kind of feeling about it, the kind of ghostly presences that look very different to humans because something's happened to their bodies before their death, effectively. So there's some moments where you're looking at the models that are there, the CGI models of these people, and you kind of look at it as a normal horror movie, and then for a second, at least for me anyway, it crossed my mind as to what happened to those people before they died to put them into this disfigured state. And then I didn't want to think about it anymore. I was wondering, did he murder a baby and graft its head onto the body of the basketball player for whatever reason he had? The woman who had her jaw smashed in, he did that to her for what reason, and I just didn't want to question anymore because there's some despicable things that must have been done to these people before their deaths. And I thought it was really affecting me at that moment. So I just stopped for a second and went, right, I'm just going to enjoy this as a horror scene for a minute and not think about what's going on in the past or what happened to these characters in the past,
absolutely. I mean, he's just psychopath. He's a sadist, exactly. As well. It's
and there's enough in this show of actual real experiences that happened rather than delving into the supernatural elements.
Exactly. So, I mean, the other final point really for me on this is that the missing 8 people there. And as well, I initially thought were down to the racist neighborhood with the harassment and the targeted kind of attacks on them. Yeah. I thought that ultimately the way they drove out the people in that house was through this and ultimately killing 3 of them as this warning. You very much get that sense. I mean, a bit like as Christina says to Atticus right at the end, you have to be smart about this. Pointing a gun at a white woman isn't going to get you very far. And similar, I kind of thought that there was possibly some kind of threat that they follow through on, and it would be like, who would believe that we would do this?
Absolutely. And right to the end there, and who would care is more the problem. It's not who would believe. It's, it feels like, early on in the episode, where they've put the bricks on the car horns outside the house, you see the police car rolling on by and the 2 guys inside smiling. So they know exactly what's going to happen. And you absolutely are supposed to feel at the end of the episode that if these 3 white guys get into the house, they're going to kill Atticus, the priestess, and Leti in the basement. They're going to catch up with them and kill the 3 of them, and those are going to be the 3 victims. You're supposed to feel that when the 3 white guys go into the house, but it flips completely as the
which was
evil
great.
Spirits take their revenge. Yeah.
It was really great. And actually, yes, those 8 missing people were not down to the racist neighborhood, but were unfortunately down to the racist, sadist, psychotic, experimenting doctor or whatever.
And the people who supplied the victims.
So this was kind of topsy-turvy for me. I don't know how many people possibly came at it from this angle. Yeah. But for me, then I just loved these twists and turns within this episode. I thought it was really excellent stuff, and again, just loved it.
Yeah, that's really the central part of the episode, but there's still so much other bits and pieces that happened within it as well. You know, even just the possession of the priestess jumping to Atticus, yes. as this evil spirit is jumping between them, their eyes going black and them speaking with his voice. Love, because it's kind of a repeat of something that we see from earlier on in the episode, as Leti took the photographs and saw the faces of the 8 dead victims in the house. This time we see, as Atticus is walking towards her, we see the face of this psychopath coming back and forth out of Atticus's head at the same time. I think it's really well done. It's really cool. Really liked it.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of this is how Leti and Ruby kind of deal with the racist neighbours. I love that they have a house party that just causes so much noise, and I could imagine being at the house party going, this is causing our neighbours so much issue. It's gonna make them so hot and sweaty around the starched collars, and I just loved that kind of defiance of doing that, and even with the burning cross on the front lawn, that she went out and went sodgers and baseball bat to the windows, the lights, to get rid of the horns blaring as well.
And went on for days. Yeah, days. She wakes up in the morning and hears them every day. I absolutely love how the scene is taken care of by Leti and the people who live in the house, all of her friends taking care of it, because it's so perfect that she gets her moment of triumph when she gets rid of the brick in each of the cars. She smashes the front window, back window, the front lights. These are the cars of those 3 guys effectively that she's destroying outside of her house. And I love instantly, is Ruby that's driving the car, where she comes out, they open up the trunk of the car, the boot of the car, they throw in the baseball bat.
And the guns, because the Atticus have all come out as well to protect her in case anything goes down. Yeah. But they hear the sirens and the car comes out, everything goes into the boot.
It's almost before they hear the sirens, though, is what it feels like. They know it's about to happen, but they want to make sure that Leti gets her moment, stands up to everybody. And then what I really like, and it's just a little touch, that they throw the jacket over the top of Leti, so they hide the dress she's wearing, so that maybe that might make some of the people that think they know who it was that did the damage, maybe they'll question themselves. Maybe that might protect Leti a bit. Also could be because she'd spending a night in jail and the dress doesn't look like it'll keep her warm in jail, so they've thrown a jacket over. Also reminded me of the fantastic James Brown clip where he's being helped off stage and gets the jacket thrown over his shoulder to help him off. So it feels like this triumphant moment almost for her, just like it did for the wonderful James Brown. But there you go, loads of little inspirations in those scenes. You mentioned the seance as well, the seance with the kids that was in
the Ouija board. Yeah.
That was just it's such a staple of 70s and 80s horror movies, definitely. I know at this stage, I think most people know the Ouija board was a board game created by Parker Brothers, who did Monopoly, didn't they? That's Parker Brothers, isn't it?
Yeah, Trivial Pursuit, I think, as well.
Maybe, yeah. But it was effectively a board game that you would go to a shop and buy, a jokey board game about talking to the dead kind of thing. But I love how it's used in here, because we've seen it so many times before, but the 4 kids together using it, how terrified they are as it starts to move on its own. I love how all the kids just start getting completely freaked out as it spells out the words "George is dead," specifically for poor Dee, her father, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, effectively at this stage. There's a kind of a time jump of a couple of weeks. We hear in here 3 weeks since his funeral, isn't it? And Dee's in there thinking that they're all effectively attacking her because her father's passed away, but they're saying it's the spirits in the house that are doing it, you know?
Yeah, I like the Ouija board aspect to this. I think, were they down in the cellar or up in the attic? Because we later see Hippolyta going up to try and find the kids because of the cross burning. She wants to get them away from trouble and potential fights and harm. Yeah. But we have that moment where she goes and looks up, and I thought we were going to have some kind of attic scene as well. But in the end, the one of the bedroom doors just opens, and there's this whole clockwork solar system in the middle of the room, which is kind of just didn't necessarily go anywhere, I have to say. I wasn't entirely sure what that meant, or whether it was something to do with George, because in this episode as well, something we haven't maybe mentioned is there is the repercussions of George's death. We have the funeral at the start. We have which is a very joyous one and very lively, but you just have Leti there crying, sat down, not really participating. And of course, there's that kind of awkwardness with Atticus at Hippolyta's home where George lived. And he says it himself, he's worn out his welcome and he's looking for somewhere else to stay.
Yeah.
So all of that is going on as well. And I just wondered if it was something to do with George, but it wasn't obvious to me, I have to say.
Yeah, I will say probably this is one of the ones that we're going to have to watch this space and see what happens to that in future. They're still in the house at the end of the episode, which means that diorama, I guess you call it, is still there. So we're probably going to see what that was in the future. But there's a couple of things, it's an episode of TV. You can't cover everything, but it feels like sometimes when you're putting your potential victims in scary situations, you got to come back and make sure that they're okay. And I felt with the kids and Dee, while again, I absolutely loved the seance scene, the actual Ouija board scene. While I loved that as, a great trope changed for this episode to put the kids in trouble, I really would have wanted to see them one more time in the episode to go, oh no, they're fine. They've already been taken home by one of the friends of the family, because they got scared or something, but it felt like, maybe they didn't need the scene, but it felt like everybody that's in the house is in trouble all the time. So, but I suppose part of the structure of the episode again was having the countdown to day 10 or the count up to day 10. So you do skip things that are going on. We hear just in dialogue from Ruby that everybody that had moved into the house originally, all the artists that had moved in, all of Letty's friends, they've all moved out because they're not willing to stay in the scary house anymore with the creepy neighbors or the crazy racist neighbors, and all the other things going on in the house. So we probably are skipping a few things because of the actual mechanism, of how the episode's told. But, I just felt I was kind of like, can somebody check on the children? Can somebody just confirm that Ruby found, or that Ruby found the children, or that Hippolyta found the children? Somebody, tell me here, because it's a weird moment when Dee runs away from them. You're expecting that later in the episode she's going to be caught in one of the rooms or something with a scary ghost. You know what I mean? That's what I was expecting to happen.
No,
so.
Definitely.
But there you go. Loads going on in there. I love the party. Must say that looked like such a good party. I love anybody who sets up a band in their house to play music, especially
Absolutely.
Music as good as Ruby's band.
It was really good.
She is such a great singer. Absolutely fab. I love that we've had 2 live concerts from her effectively in episode 1 and episode 3 now, with 2 or 3 songs. A beautiful voice, really, really good. So I love that. But I don't think I'd get away with in my house or in our house having a house party where we had a full on band going on in the house at all.
We could have it at the bottom of the garden.
Yeah, we live in a suburb, so
we just invite the neighbours.
Invite the neighbours. That's the one. Invite the neighbours. I wouldn't invite their neighbours though.
No, not at all.
Let's go through some of the other things that happened in the episode that we may not have talked about. We talked a little bit about Montrose in the episode, but one of the things we kind of hear about the death of George is that they've explained it, saying the sheriff of that town killed George. That's how he died. And that Montrose and Atticus took care of the sheriff and got out of there effectively. That's the story they've been telling Hippolyta. That's the story they've been telling everybody else. So, but she's known from the first moment they returned that that's not the truth of the story.
She's got that nagging feeling. She says that something is not right about George's death.
Exactly. I think one of the things that you'd probably get that we talked about a little bit before, how scary George's life must have been if he's the one writing the Traveler's Guide for America to make sure that everybody stays safe. Any black travelers that are traveling around America stay safe going to these areas. He must have gotten himself into a lot of scary situations and gotten himself out of those before in order to not put them into the book effectively. So that would probably make Hippolyta realize this is a man who can really take care of himself in terrorizing situations or terrifying situations. So something deeper must have gone on. But there's also, again, this is a supernatural show with a lot of spirituality in it. So potentially the connection between Hippolyta and her husband makes you go, I know there's something weird that happened there.
Yeah,
you're not
exactly.
Nobody's on the level here, you know. And also Montrose having like 7 bottles of vodka, a day since he got back probably will be an indicator here.
Well, for sure. I mean, Montrose is feeling George's death as well. Interesting about the scene though with Montrose and Hippolyta, because it's at George's office where they do the travel guide, and there's really something happens that's really weird with the sound as they're speaking. It's kind of the music goes and something passes very quickly outside of the window of George's business, and if it wasn't for the music, you would never be drawn to it.
That's true.
In the context of how the scene is set up and the conversation between Montrose and Hippolyta. And I was just thinking, is that my imagination? Is this just a little nightmarish Easter egg that's chucked in to just play with your mind as to whether that is the thing that's happening, or is it possibly George or something else? But certainly it's something to watch out for.
Just like, did a kid run past the window at that specific moment and they just decided to soundtrack it with scary music?
It could be.
Or is it like The Haunting of Hill House, where if we go back and watch the series, there's going to be loads of ghosts, Easter eggs in every single corner of every house that we just didn't see because they're on the peripheral of our vision, which was such a great touch in that show. Really excited to see the second season of that coming back later on this year as well. But
another great haunted house TV series for sure.
Yeah. So it looks like at the end of the episode, Montrose seems like he's going to tell Hippolyta about how we lost George. Maybe might get that. He might be revealing that to Hippolyta there. Just another touch from her throughout the episode. This frustration that she has at the loss of George and leaving her behind effectively. We see her taking it out on his copy of Dracula, his favorite book, as she's been ripping out pages of it. And then we just see that little moment when she comes in with her shopping and has a copy of Dracula to replace George's copy. You know, it's just little moments that you just kind of tell the relationship. We saw how strong the relationship was in episode 1. We saw him calling her and saying that he wanted her to come on the road next time they went back out. Possibly an indicator that he wasn't coming back, I suppose, if we were thinking about it like that at the time. I wasn't. But now we see that she's kind of hating him for being gone, but also loving the things she misses about him, of course, because she's going through that absolutely horrifying feeling of loss, I suppose. One of the other things we just need to talk about as well, you mentioned earlier on about Christina coming back at the end of the episode, but I suppose one of the big conversations that happens in the episode is really between Ruby and Leti, and how Leti got the money for the house.
That was an awkward conversation.
Yeah, considering we've heard a lot about their mother being a deadbeat mom. We heard in the last episode Leti talking to Atticus about her mom and the fact that she left them both many times on their own when she'd disappear with pretty much any man that would take her home. And then suddenly Leti turns up with enough money to buy a house here. Ruby questioning it immediately and thinking, hang on a second, that couldn't possibly be our mom. And if she was going to leave anybody money, she'd leave me money, not you.
Yeah, it did feel strange that Leti was buying this house, but I think that was another thing that fed into me believing that she was buying a house where there had been a lot of murders, or this whole thing of the 3 people missing right at the start was that it was so cheap that Leti could afford to do it. And then there was this conversation between the two where in telling Ruby that it was from an inheritance, it sparks off the sort of the underlying tension between these two sisters, which is money, because we as you say, seeing Leti asking for accommodation because all her money's gone, and Ruby kind of being the sensible one who would look after her, and then all of a sudden finding out that she's bought this house, but also that their mother did have money and she never told her about that. Like she has like great moments, says, even if it was Mum's will that it went to you, that you didn't even think to share it with me, to split it between the two of us, and to tell me the truth that you had this money.
Exactly. Actually, it wasn't split up between the two of us. I noticed something in the dialogue there, and I need to check it the next time I watch the episode. But Ruby says something about splitting it with her and a brother. So there's actually another member of the family that we haven't met yet, I think.
Okay, I did not get that, I have to say.
Need to check that. So let's just talk finally about Christina. So at the end of the episode, it is Atticus who realizes there's no way Leti could have possibly got this money from anywhere else other than from the Braithwhites and their massive fortune. So Christina must be alive, right? So
and there was a hint to the Winthrop house as well, and that's what gave the game away. And he goes to kill her effectively. But she manages to weave her magic to prevent him. And I loved that scene where you just have that single bead of sweat coming down his cheek as he's kind of been paralyzed by the spell of Christina.
Yeah, absolutely. The clue that there was a connection between the Braithwhites and the horror house that Letty's bought is that the horror house is known as the Winthrop house. And Winthrop was one of the names that was on the painting that was shown to Atticus before the ceremony in the last episode. Written on the painting was the name Winthrop and the name Braithwhite as well. So the family's in some way connected. So Atticus has pieced the whole bit together. Very cool. Interesting as well that Atticus has a job in Florida that he's supposed to be getting back to. He's been gone for a month, and he did give the finger to the whole of the south of America as he was leaving, going up to Chicago. So, so you're wondering whether, is that true, or was he actually just hoping that Leti was...
He says his boss only thought he was going to be gone for a week, and it's like 4 weeks later kind of thing. So,
do you think he was actually angling for Leti to let him stay in the house, maybe?
Oh, I think so.
I think so. I think
certainly what happened in the bathroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of sexual tension between these two.
Definitely.
But it's a good sexual tension, I think, between the two. It does feel natural, and it doesn't feel like a horror trope, even though the sexual tension between characters can very much be a horror trope.
I was actually thinking about that when we watched the episode, John. Do you know what I loved so much about this? We find out that Letty's a virgin. She's had sex for the first time in horror house, surrounded by ghosts, and she isn't dead by the end of the episode.
Exactly.
So it's the exact opposite of all the stupid tropes that we put up with for 25 years.
It's playing on the trope, but it's not being the trope.
Exactly.
It's great.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Finally, have to mention in Christina's speech to Atticus when he's stuck.
Oh, yeah.
When he's stuck, not being able to shoot her, not being able to move, beads of sweat falling down his face. Christina tells him all about the Book of Ardham and the pages of the Book of Ardham that she is now going out to seek, like some kind of adventurer, that she's like Indiana Jones, possibly. This whole concept that the Book of Ardham is what has taught them all the magic that they know, all these amazing spells that can do amazing things and do amazing damage. But what could happen if you put together all of the pages of the Book of Ardham and you learned the full language of the Book of Ardham? What kind of spells could you do then? Kind of thing.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. So this, I think, is our tip of, we started out our episode saying, I think it's going to be an anthology show in some sense, but I think this is the overarching story potentially for at least the next couple of episodes. Christina going on her search for the pages of the Book of Ardham while there's some horrific things going on in Lovecraft Country.
Definitely. And I think also two of the things was that Atticus wasn't wearing the ring that he had from the last episode. So I was looking out for that one. And also simply the fact that, yes, Christina Braithwaite got out of that crumbling Ardham, Sons of Ardham Lodge alive, or managed to get out before then. So I was just wondering who else, maybe her friend, the butler, William, or whether,
her friend who's a boy.
The boyfriend.
Friend who's a boy.
The boyfriend.
Friend who's a boy.
The friend who's a boy, the boyfriend, and just whether with this magic, she's obviously using Atticus here.
Yes, absolutely.
Will it be for good, for evil, or just simply to bring back her father, Samuel? Maybe there's an element of that about
I don't think she wants Samuel back.
I don't know. She's kind of been kind and considerate to Atticus, but she still upholds everything that subjugates him. So unless through these adventures she has a change of heart and a change of mind, I'm not entirely sure that we're able to trust her.
I'm still trusting my theory from last week that she gave the ring to Atticus, and her power was in the ring to stop the ritual that was going on and kill Samuel, the person who has denied her what she believes rightful place at the center of this whole society. If she gets all the pages and gets all the power, then she is right at the center of the society.
That's
and she doesn't need him back. She doesn't need Samuel back.
I'm still not on board with that theory.
Okay.
But I like it.
Okay. I'll tell you another reason why I believe that theory is true.
Have you watched ahead?
I haven't watched ahead. Of course not. I have been reading the book, so.
Okay.
Christina's not in the book. Christina is actually, Samuel's son, in the book. But they have changed it to Christina for the show. So that's different. But there's definitely a scene that happens that, is pointing in the direction of my theory anyway.
Great stuff.
But I haven't finished the book, so I don't know for definite. Anyway, that is it, I think, for most of my notes for the episode, most of my thoughts about the episode overall. What did you think of the episode, John? Anything else you want to talk about?
No, for me, I loved this episode. I would give this 5 violently faulty lifts or elevators out of 5.
A decapitating elevator.
It really was. So cool. Hats off and heads off to this episode for having this whole haunted house, hell house premise. And I just really enjoyed it. And part of it was probably because whilst watching it, the way it was, I thought in my head it was going to turn out, was turned on its head, with the misdirection and everything else, and me sort of going down that rabbit warren of how I thought it was going to play out. And it was turned on its head, and I thought it was great. And that's why I'm giving it 5 violently faulty lifts out of 5.
Excellent. Do you know how many times you said head in that section, John?
Lots.
I think the loss of the head of one of the racist white guys being hit by a lift is playing in your mind somehow.
Let's just say I won't be getting into a lift in the near future.
It's creepy, isn't it?
It is.
I don't know that it's just so well put together. The set design as well for this made it work. I absolutely love this episode as well. I'm really looking forward to episode 4. What I'm so impressed with, I'm actually reading the book kind of alongside this, as I mentioned earlier on. And it does take a lot of the great parts from the book and just kind of gets rid of some of the other stuff or mashes together some of the other stuff in a slightly different way. And I think this episode particularly, compared to what I read in the book, is much more tension filled than what I saw in there. So they've done a great job of turning this into a really good episode of the show. Really excited to see the next one and see what's going on.
Yeah, really looking forward to episode 4 now. But we have some feedback through from some of our listeners. Remember, fellow Dreadfuls, you can send in your thoughts on any of the episodes of Lovecraft Country to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. You can join us over on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries, or you can send in audio playback through the email, as well as going to our website, which is tvpodcastindustries.com, and leaving up to 90 seconds of your thoughts on the right-hand side tab. So yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're recording a little bit in advance at the moment. If you do want to send your thoughts, we'll talk about them on the next episode that we're recording, where we are going to be moving back to a more regular schedule after episode 6, I think it is. We'll be going to episodes recording a little bit after the episodes come out, really because we're going to be doing The Boys and Lovecraft Country at the same time. So just going to manage the timing on that. But if you do want to send in any thoughts, as John said, email it to the email address there. We have some thoughts on episode 2 to begin with.
Yeah, first up is a voicemail from Steve Brown on episode 2.
Hey, Derek and John, this is Steve, and this is for Lovecraft Country episode 2. Just finished watching it for the first time, and I feel like I could watch these episodes like 3 times and I still wouldn't get it. So I'm so glad you guys are podcasting, because I mean, wow, this episode in particular, it's hard to pick just a couple big moments, but that whole sequence where he asked for their memories to be restored and she just did it, I was like, wow, this is weird spellage magic working here. And then of course, that ending. But the biggest moment, really, for me, I will say, it took me several minutes to figure out who he was. But when we finally met Montrose, and I realized, I know that actor. I can't pinpoint it. Where is he from? And finally, he said some line that struck me, that he's Leonard from Happen Leonard. And I know he's done a bunch of other things as well, but Michael K. Williams was amazing in Happen Leonard. If you ever checked out that series, I think there's like 3 seasons. It's him and the name escapes me. The guy from Knight's Tale. It'll come to me after I finish this. But anyway, so Happen Leonard is great, and Michael K. Williams. There's still 8 episodes left. Where is this going to go now? Are we going to go track down more of these lodges? Are these guys still going to be coming after Atticus and his family? Oh, and that's the final thing that I'll wrap up with. I thought the last name was Foreman. It wasn't until this week that I realized, no, their last name is Freeman, like free man. Thought that was so cool. All right, can't wait to hear what you guys thought. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Steve. So good to hear your feedback. I'm so glad you're enjoying the show as well. It's really dense. I think the amount of stuff they're putting in the episode. I think what we mentioned about episode 2 was it felt like an entire season squeezed into that episode, and we had no idea where it was going to go. And what do? Well, you just do 3 weeks later. Here's another story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's tie it back into the other episodes. There's still loads of stuff that we probably didn't realize that we didn't know, I suppose. So thought that was kind of cool. Hap and Leonard is a show I have never ever heard of. I wonder what channel it was on, because I don't think it made it over to here in the UK. But the other person you were trying to think of was James Purfoy, the other person in the cast with Michael K. Williams. We know Michael K. Williams from The Wire. He's probably, that's probably the biggest role for me, definitely.
Good old Omar.
Yeah. Omar's
great in The Wire.
Awesome. Absolutely cool. James Purfoy, we know from Sex Education. He was the father in Sex Education.
Yes.
And he's going to be in Pennyworth season 2, another show we'll be covering. Weirdly, not anything like Lovecraft Country, but looking forward to seeing what he's going to be bringing to that show. But I might have to check out Happen Leonard, because I pretty much loved everything I've seen Michael K. Williams in. So.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Michael K. Williams, I suppose, up until Lovecraft Country, we've just seen When They See Us as well. He was one of the fathers of the Central Park 5, really tragic portrayal of a father in that
Fabulous,
in that 4-part series.
Yeah.
It was just really, really good. Yeah, Michael K. Williams is phenomenal. I've loved him since The Wire, and yeah, really such a great actor. So yeah, thanks so much, Steve, for the feedback and spellage. I will take that forward from now on, I think.
I like that. Yeah, there's so much magic in the episodes as well. I think this is part of the thing that people may not realize how much inspiration for science fiction and fantasy came from some of the Lovecraft books. There were absolutely monsters, demons, and magic involved in there, but certain authors over the course of the 20th century took elements of it and turned them into their own franchises. Not many of them combined them all in there. So I think that's partly what we're seeing here. Is this show is also taking some inspiration from some of the writings of Lovecraft. So to the show, it would make absolute sense to have magic in there. But we're probably not as used to seeing magic on screen in such a grounded show as this is. So it does come as complete surprise. Even in that first episode, we only saw really one instance of it, which was the car flipping, the car that was chasing Atticus and Leti and George, it flipping before it hit Christina's car. And we were wondering what was that. The second episode, we actually see proper magic in place. We see, click of the fingers and something happens, that kind of stuff. But as Christina says, if she gets the other pages from Adam's book, what magic is coming then,
She can open the doors for Cthulhu.
Exactly what I was thinking. Exactly. We also got a bit of feedback over on Twitter from Will B, who's a wonderful listener for the last couple of years to our podcast. He was totally shocked after episode 2, but also pointed out, I'm near certain that was Tick's mother in the photograph. George, he says, I believe there was a photo of their family in the first episode. unbelievable how much they can pack into each episodes. I went back and had a check on episode 1. When Atticus goes back to his father's apartment, he picks up a copy of the Count of Monte Cristo, which is his father's favourite book, and the photo falls out of that. It's about the 25-minute mark of episode 1. I went back myself, definitely had a look at the haircut and the dress of the lady in the photograph. And
is looking rather similar.
Dances with George, look very, very similar. So it looks like George may have had a relationship with Atticus's mom.
Yeah.
And Montrose's wife. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wilby. Also over on Twitter at the Soul Man, pointed out that George pulled out a copy of The House on the Borderland from his library of books in the Ardham Lodge. The House on the Borderland is a supernatural horror novel by a British fantasist, William Hope Hodgson, and the novel is a hallucinatory account of a recluse's stay at a remote house and his experiences of supernatural creatures and other worldly dimensions.
Sounds familiar.
It really does. Yes, this was a novel that Lovecraft praised at length, and certainly by the sounds of it has probably influenced a number of writers. Indeed, one of my favourite ones, Richard Matheson with Hell House. It sounds very, very similar. It does. In some respects. So, it's a good spot there at the Soul Man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Soul Man. That was really cool to see those kind of things. If you see anything else that's coming on in the episode, if anybody, any of our wonderful Dreadfuls sees anything else in the show that they want to point out, it seems like it's filled to the brim with little references and little touches to things that we may not notice on first viewing or second viewing. If you see anything that we haven't talked about, email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, and we'll talk about it on the podcast. Thanks so much. And thanks so much to everybody for joining us. We hope you stay subscribed to the podcast. And if you enjoy what you hear, why not share it with your friends? Sharing the podcast is sharing the love. See, John, I said it this time.
You certainly did. And in fact, on the Dreadful podcast, sharing the podcast is sharing the screaming.
That's true.
And terror, which is very good for me, because I have a lot that really does need to be passed around for sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. We will be back next week with Lovecraft Country Season 1, Episode 4. No, it doesn't contain the actor Viggo Mortensen, but it is called A History of Violence. So yes. Nice. Let's see what happens here.
God, that's a great film. Viggo Mortensen. Awesome. Awesome in that film. Yeah. But that's on our Dreadful podcast. As I mentioned earlier on, we will be starting our coverage of The Boys on Amazon Prime with the first 3 episodes of The Boys over on our main feed at tvpodcastindustries.com and also on The Boys podcast from TV Podcast Industries. I just subscribe to TV Podcast Industries instead of subscribing to the individual ones personally, but that's because I know you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of all the shows we cover.
Yes, I think so. I think we can say that. I hope we can say that.
After 520 episodes, I think we can say that now.
Yeah, absolutely.
God, it's only 504 episodes. Where am I getting? I'm exaggerating again.
Well, I think on that note, on that scary note, I think it is time to say goodbye to our fellow Dreadfuls. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. As always, it is a pleasure to speak with you on all things Dreadful and all things Lovecraft Country. And importantly, keep watching, keep listening, and like Leti, keep pioneering.
Oh, keep pioneering. That's pretty good. I like that. I was ready to go keep screaming along with you.
Well, that is, keep screaming is an unspoken truism for this podcast.
That's the general. Okay.
Yes.
I love it. Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you again next time. Bye.
Bye.